Hey, what's up? Joe Carabase here. Welcome back to That Was Yesterday. On today's episode, we are talking about intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting? I'm sure you've heard about it, but what is it and how do you do it? Because one thing I hear often just through the grapevine, but also just through talking to so many different people every single day, it seems to be something that's on a lot of people's radar, but there seems to be some gaps missing. And I've been, I don't want to say perfecting, but working on our philosophy regarding intermittent fasting for almost 10 years, I would say. Actually 2010 is really when I started intermittent fasting and executing it with a lot of different clients of all different backgrounds. And so we do things a little bit different. And so I think you're going to find a lot of value here, hopefully a better understanding of what intermittent fasting is and how it could fit into your life, if it should even fit into your life, because that's another question you should explore. Just because something works for others doesn't mean that you have to do it either. And I think that's a really important thing. I'm a huge advocate of intermittent fasting. I do it myself personally. That being said, like everything else, if you're going to find a long-term way of eating, it has to be something that fits your lifestyle. So enjoy today's show. Please feel free to reach out on social media if you have any follow-up questions. And if you found any value, please go ahead and share with friends. Appreciate you. All right, so when it comes to intermittent fasting, there is a lot of confusion, I think, out there about like intermittent fasting, what it is, why to do it, who's it for, and there's a lot around that. And I think like anything, when something becomes trendy, it gets to that point of like, it picks up its own life and it creates a life of its own where people are talking about it who may not know the best practices or who have had experience doing it one way, and then that carries on and all this information, it gets really, really confusing and overwhelming. So here's the thing with intermittent fasting is that it is so if we think about what is intermittent fasting and why would you want to do it? So intermittent fasting essentially is giving your body a very clean-cut eating window in which most protocols, a standard protocol is a 16-8. So that's 16 hours of fasting followed by 8 hours of feeding. And in that 8 hours of feeding, the one mistake a lot of people will make is they'll just sort of graze. You don't want to graze because the whole idea of intermittent fasting is to have very specific times of which you are eating and then shutting off so that your body can then digest and do its thing. And so in that process, your metabolism will get very efficient. And so basically the 16-8 is the standard. Now I'm going to talk about some ways to start intermittent fasting if it's something you're considering and maybe that seems like too much or too aggressive, but generally speaking, that is what intermittent fasting is. Now, why it's important, I mentioned about increasing your metabolism by making it more efficient. It does that through resting your internal organs. So whether you're eating protein and spinach or you're eating McDonald's, your internal organs have to work to process that food, right? And so giving your internal organs a much needed rest through the quote unquote fast, you're actually speeding up their efficiency and they allow them to process more. And the other and really, really important point of intermittent fasting is that you're basically, when you're not eating, your body is then going to burn off calories that might otherwise be stored as fat. See, that's the thing that we often eat as a way of a behavior, something we're used to doing, versus something we actually need to do. Like the human body can go weeks without eating. And even just me as a natural bodybuilder, I can tell you, the body's amazing what it can do with very little calories. Now, I'm not suggesting it. I'm not suggesting eat like very little calories. In fact, I think it's a bad thing to do if you're not doing it for a specific purpose, like a bodybuilding show for a set period of time. That being said, we don't need to eat as frequently as we are eating. And so with intermittent fasting, the benefit for so many people is that it's going to improve your digestion, improve your elimination, improve your metabolism, which is going to help you burn more calories overall. So there's a lot of benefit to that. And you save a lot of mental energy, believe it or not, because when you are eating in a short window of like, say, 8 hours, well, you should not be consumed by food outside of that. And I'm going to circle back to this later on, but we spend a lot of time thinking about food, when we're going to eat, when we're eating, what we're going to eat, all that good stuff. So you save some mental energy that way, but you also save mental energy because for your body to actually process food, it takes work. And so it actually takes a lot out of you when you're breaking down food. Just think about like after a Thanksgiving meal, for instance, right? That's probably an extreme example, but it gives you the idea, like what happens after you're stuffed? Well, your cognition probably isn't great. You certainly don't feel like you could physically do anything of any significance, right? It sort of weighs you down. And that's what happens to so many of us, is that we eat more than we should. And especially for women who are dealing with menopause and the slowing down of your metabolism, when you're eating more calories and your activity is decreasing and your metabolism is slowing, that's a recipe for disaster. So intermittent fasting can be a way to sort of spark it. Now, I mentioned one mistake through intermittent fasting, which is grazing through that 8-hour window. And you don't want to do that. But another mistake that happens through intermittent fasting, there are two big ones. Number one is that a lot of times when you're intermittent fasting is you're not getting enough calories during that 8-hour window. So I know it might sound like a contradiction. On one hand, you don't want to graze, but on the other hand, you want to make sure you're eating enough calories. This is the challenge of fasting, right? But it is something that you need to consider, and particularly protein. And so that's one thing. And another mistake people will make with intermittent fasting is they'll read online or hear somebody talk in an Instagram reel about 16-8. You can't eat for 16 hours or you're not fasting and you're blah, 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 blah. And someone on their high horse telling you that you need to do it this exact way. Well, okay, cool. Yes, I will agree that if you don't eat or you don't have any calories, that would be considered more of a fast than, of course, having calories. However, what I found through a lot of self-study, I've been fasting since, for over 14 years now. And I've helped hundreds, if not thousands of people fast. I have a lot of experience when it comes to fasting. What I found is that there's a point of which if we're approaching that 16-hour mark, we can really start to fixate, especially if we have a lot of stress going on in our life, or if your job requires you to be very productive, or if you got kids running around and your 16-hour fast ends at 1 p.m., that last 2 or 3 hours can be miserable. And this is where I differ from a lot of quote unquote experts on fasting, which is if your goal is to intermittent fast, to burn fat, to lose fat, then in what world does it make sense for you to increase your cortisol just so you can hit 16 hours? It's counterproductive, right? So I found an intermediate way to do it over the years. And I've been practicing this again for a very long time, and it works extremely well, which is our approach is more of a food fast. So for 16 hours, you're not putting food in your mouth. However, I will go to a regression, if you will, of intermittent fasting for people who might have trouble with any level of fasting or who have something like hypothyroid, which does have something specific we need to think about. But the point is we basically, within our 16-hour fast, the way we teach it in our Never Look Back program is you have 16 hours of no food. However, you can drink water, you can drink tea, you can drink coffee. Now, we recommend to have your coffee with nothing else in there. And we also recommend to put 20 grams of collagen in your coffee or tea. If you don't drink coffee, then in your tea. Now, the reason why we do that is twofold. Number one, it's a habit stack. You're already having your coffee or tea. So one mistake a lot of people make, especially women, is not get enough protein. So if you're already having your coffee and your tea, why not add protein to something you're already doing? Now, obviously, it mixes well with hot coffee, not so much with cold coffee. So that you have to get a little creative. Maybe you blend it, other ways to go about it. But that's going to give you a good 20 grams of protein, which is very important. As I mentioned, it's hard for you to get the amount of protein you need in an 8-hour window when you're just eating regular food in 8 hours. So that's one thing we allow. The other thing we allow is a protein shake. So protein powder, so separate from the collagen, but protein powder and water. So not milk, not almond milk, nothing else, but protein powder and water a few hours after you have the collagen in your coffee. And the reason why we do that again is to help make sure you get enough protein, which is super important, especially for women over 50, but also because that little bit amount of protein in the collagen in the coffee is going to give your body just enough satiety that it will allow you to more easily last that 16 hours from your previous meal. And that's really important because We have enough stress in our world to worry about. What we don't need to worry about is creating more stress in our life when we're trying to do something healthy for ourselves. And I think it's a mistake so many of us fall into. We want to be healthy and we set ourselves up for failure right from the get. And so if intermittent fasting is causing you to increase your cortisol just to get that 16 hours, I would suggest stop, time out, Zach Morris style, and instead add the collagen to your coffee, add the protein shake a few hours after. Now, people will say, oh, well, that's not intermittent fasting, blah, blah. Okay. Look, we're talking minimal calories here. And we're also talking most of the population is not getting enough protein. So if we're already deficient in protein, your body's going to absorb it really quickly. So yes, while it might not be as equal as just like a water fast, it is still going to be something that's very beneficial and a lot easier to do. Now, some considerations here. If you're like, hey, I'm trying a 16-hour, and now look, your first 16-hour fast, even done that way, might be challenging. You might find that it's hard for you to get to that 16 hours, and that's okay, right? So give yourself like grace, give yourself a few days of trying it. Now, if either right from the get, you realize that's too long for you right now, or you want to just start more conservatively, what I would say is two things. Number one is, first of all, a lot of people say they can't intermittent fast. You can. The only circumstance of which I would not recommend it is if you have hypothyroid. Other than that, I can say with complete conviction, you can absolutely fast. You're just going based off of what your brain is telling you that you can and can't do based on its experience. But that doesn't mean that's what your limitation or that's what your threshold is. That's just what you're used to doing. And if you've had breakfast your entire life, well, of course, it's going to be hard for you to just all of a sudden not have breakfast, right? But I can guarantee you can do it. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I mean, more hundreds of times, right? So that's one thing for you to consider. But the other thing for you to consider is you don't have to go 0 to 60. So if you're just starting your fasting journey, start with 12 hours. And 12 hours is very manageable, especially doing collagen in your coffee. So then from there, you can go up to 14 hours, and then you can go up to 16 hours. And I even go to, oftentimes, I minimally do 16 hours on most days. But look, two words I always make sure to never say are always and never, which, by the way, I did not create that. That's like a cliche, but I think it's a very strong cliche. You're not going to do anything in the world all the time. Nothing is always or nothing, right? So it's very bad to set yourself up in that way with like, oh, I'm always going to do this. It doesn't have to be like that. I'm just talking about most of the time. So most of the time, I will do a 16-hour fast. However, sometimes I find that whether it's a lot of stuff going on at work or a busy day, whatever it might be, if I start to feel my cortisol levels elevating, I'll break the fast. I'm not playing a game, right? And I'll pick back up tomorrow. Now, most often, actually, I'll do probably 18 to 20 hours, which you can do as well. But I'm not suggesting you need to do that. And I'm not suggesting you start with that. However, another really important thing for you to consider is, let's say you overeat. You know what? You're human. It's okay. The world is not going to stop because you overeat. Yet what happens? We're so hard on ourselves. We do Super Bowl, we do New Year's, Christmas, whatever, random Tuesday, your friend got good news, you go out, you have fun, whatever. You have more calories than you want to. And then we make the big mistake of self-shaming ourselves and really making ourselves feel bad for that. When really, fasting is like, it's like the ace in your back. Like, oh, you overate? Who gives a shit? Extend your fast the next day. You have more calories in your system because you just overate, right? So rather than eat 16 hours later, eat 20 hours later, or do 24 hours, or just do 16 hours. But the point is that what ends up happening is so often we'll put a lot of stress on ourselves and shame and mentally be very tough for no good reason, when really fasting is a tool you can just call upon really whenever to help you manipulate your metabolism. And manipulation is a really bad word in some senses, but I think it's a really positive meaning when we think about your metabolism, because you can manipulate your metabolism. You can absolutely manipulate your metabolism. And obviously, if you're a woman over 50 and you're dealing with menopause, it's going to be slower, and your metabolism, that is, and it will take more time to get it going, but it will. I can guarantee you it will, without question. And from there, there's other types of fasting protocols you can do. But I think the big thing is to realize, as effective as intermittent fasting is, for all the reasons I just said, it also isn't the only way. And while I know without a shadow of doubt that you could fast if you wanted to, if you're finding it's creating more harm than good, it's not in your best interest to try to force it. There's enough hard things in life that we can, we don't need to add more stress that doesn't need to be there for something like that. So in other words, intermittent fasting isn't the only way to increase your metabolism either. It is an effective way to do it, but it's not the only way. Now, the other thing I mentioned is if you have hypothyroid, I would not intermittent fast, as that could mess with your thyroid. Now, different things you can do. One is if you're paying attention to your levels of your thyroid levels, that is, see what happens if you do it our way, which is the collagen in your coffee and the protein shake, right? If you're finding that's throwing you off, add some fruit to your protein shake. If you're finding that's throwing you off, add some fruit in between your shake and your coffee, or have it with your coffee. Why fruit? Well, fruit is super easy for your body to digest. So it's very, very minimal. Now, people, until the blue in the, I love hearing this all. It's so fascinating. All the time I hear people freak out about the sugar in fruit. Look, nobody in the history of this world has ever gotten overweight from eating fruit. That's not the reason people have gotten overweight. It never will be the reason. Our bodies are used to digesting fruit. We've been doing it since the dawn of civilization, as far as we know. The other thing about fruit is that with it being natural and something our bodies are evolved to digest, it also has fiber. And so while, yes, there 100% are carbohydrates and there are sugars in fruit, and yeah, of course, like if I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show, I'm not overeating fruit. But again, we're talking like that, then we're really starting to nitpick. But the point is that when you have sugars in general, and you have it with fiber, which is what you're getting with most pieces of fruit, it's going to slow down the effect of the sugar anyway. So you really don't have to stress about it. So that's a very important side note when we're talking about with fruit in this sort of conversation. But that's a way to have some fruit and sort of quote unquote break your fast, but in a very delicate way, right? Another alternative is to incorporate bone broth into that period of time where you're fasting. And so you might do your collagen in your coffee, then you might have, a couple cups of bone broth, and you put a little bit of sea salt in there or some herbs. Trader Joe's has some really good herbs that are pretty clean that, there's a mushroom spice I love from there that I put in my bone broth. But again, that's a way to get you some calories, help you feel some satiety, give your body something without giving it too much. And so you're still getting a lot of the benefits of fasting, which, by the way, I mentioned, about fasting as a tool and ways to manipulate your metabolism. So again, something we've been doing for a very long time, a better part of 14 years is a fruit fast. So this is in my book as well, but the fruit fast, in a very simple way, you're basically allowing yourself to have fruit for 24 hours, no actual food, just fruit. The idea is that you're just eating fruit when you're hungry, no set schedule, no set amount. When you're hungry, you can only eat so much fruit. That might sound crazy, but you'll find out when you're fruit fasting, you can only eat so much fruit. It has a lot of water and it has fiber. You can only eat so much fruit. And so again, it's easy for your digestive system so that you're burning off some extra calories. You're giving your digestive system a much needed break. So you're getting a lot of benefits from an extended water fast, except you're not getting the cortisol spike from not having any calories. Now, an alternative to that would be a bone broth fast. Same idea, just bone broth for 24 hours. And there's a lot of studies on that more recently to show the effectiveness of that. Now, I will say when it comes to bone broth, if you have any sort of medication or anything, any illness or autoimmune disease of which makes you sensitive to histamine, that is something you need to consider with bone broth because there is levels of histamine in bone broth. But that aside, it's a very effective way. And also bone broth coats your stomach lining. And so many of us have gut issues. And so bone broth is something really good for you to do as well. And so those are like the main things that I wanted to kind of cover when it comes to fasting, the big things that I often find myself talking to people about. What questions? I mean,
in a fruit fast, how long would this be for? As far as like how many days or day a week thing or a couple days a week thing? And you include water in there too, right? Yes, no?
Yeah, definitely. So you'll include water. Oh, and thank you for bringing up. That's a very important question because yes, you definitely are going to have water during your fruit fast or your bone broth fast or your regular intermittent fast. However, especially with a bone broth fast or a fruit fast Or if you're doing our treatments, our pod, which is going to increase your metabolism, our laser lipo, which is going to, get your lymphatic system going on overdrive, helping you spot reduce. Those two things, as well as the extended fasts, are going to cause you to urinate more and flush your system more. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing, believe it or not. However, you got to make sure that you're replenishing with electrolytes. That is key. If you don't replenish with electrolytes, then you're peeing out so much, you're going to lose some cognition because your electrolytes can be really low. So
I take extra potassium for that reason.
Well, that's great if you do that. But the other thing I recommend in general for that reason, if you something you're already identified with, is I would still do an electrolyte packet. Now, with electrolyte packets, the brands we like are LMNT, which is a really good brand. But if you have high blood pressure, don't use that brand. That brand does have a high amount of sodium. However, it's not bad sodium, right? It's actually good salt. Your body needs salt. But when you have high blood pressure, you have to be aware of that. You have to be careful with how much sodium you're intaking. Noons is a really good brand as well. Or during your fast, as weird as it sounds, put sea salt in your water. Put sea salt in your bone broth. Not only will that help the taste of your bone broth, but it's helping you replenish some electrolytes.
Got it. And I do have thyroidism. I am on medication, which I have been for, 25, 30 years maybe.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, how that in the eating window, I really don't have a problem. If I stop eating about 10 o'clock at night, I might have a piece of cheese or a piece of fruit, and then it's just enough to put me into bed. But I don't eat my first meal until like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I'm on 15, 16 hours maybe. I'm really not hungry. The later I go to bed, I'm not hungry all day. I mean, I have to force myself to get water down, but for the most part, I don't eat from the morning right into the late afternoon. Every now and then, just before I get tired, I feel like I have this gnawing empty spot, and I just have to put something in it. I can't sleep.
Yeah.
I do eat it though, but I try to stay away from the cheese a lot. But fruit seems to be my go-to, especially grapes. Those are all right, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think only I would add to what you're saying is I would definitely make sure to do the collagen in the morning as well as a protein shake.
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't often I'm trying, but I'm trying to eat more natural protein too.
Yeah, which is good to do, but I don't think there's a good argument to not supplement protein, to be honest with you, because even if you eat it's very hard to eat the amount of protein you need, no matter who you are. Even me, I love eating. I'm a carnivore. I love eating any meat, any fish, any egg. That being said, to have 220 grams of protein a day, that's pretty hard, especially when you're intermittent fasting. So I obviously supplement with collagen and protein powder. But what I also do is, and this is going to sound weird, I drink pasteurized egg whites because a little carton of pasteurized egg whites is 50 grams of protein. So that's something that, and you can drink, I drink it straight, but you can also blend it. It's up to you.
Oh, what would I blend it with? Because I'm just looking at it and it just looks terrible, but I was going to just cook it.
A lot of people actually, I've never done this, but a lot of people will use cacao to mix it with, believe it or not. But you could also mix it like you're making a shake, fruits, vegetables, PB2, blend it with ice, stuff like that. A lot of people do that.
Put it in with the protein shake too?
You could, but there is something to be said about the amount of protein you're taking at once. So that's why I would recommend just separating it. But
well, good idea.
Yeah.
I didn't really think about that.
But it's a good way. It's a good way to get more in,
Yeah, I know there's no way I'm getting the protein that I should be getting without taking the protein shakes. And that's kind of, I'm wondering, even if I'm only eating really one solid meal in a day, that it's like, fruit and just picking on whatever happens to be laying around I can grab. How many? I mean, my protein's got 25 grams, 26 grams. It's what I got from you.
Mm-hmm.
the whey, and that's okay in the morning. Now, can I have one of those like 3 times a day or twice a day?
When it comes to using multiple shakes of protein per day, I'm of the belief that you should change your source. So, for instance, I use collagen, I use vegan protein, I use egg white protein, I use whey protein. So, I use all of those as my protein powders, and I rotate because I think it's good, especially when you're supplementing that much, to change up the source.
Okay, all right, I can do that. I can do that. I'm probably going to be in soon. I'm getting the protein powder thing worked out is been a little difficult because I keep trying to count every day what I'm getting for protein, and I know I'm not even half of what I need.
Yeah. But the things that we talked about today will help you, so just start focusing on that little by little. You don't have to do 50 grams of egg whites at once, but start with 8 ounces and then increase from there.
Oh, okay. I can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is it okay with this fasting with of like 10 p.m. to 4 p.m.?
Yeah. It doesn't really matter. That is concerned. I mean,
it's too long.
No, I don't think it's too long at all. Again, as long as you're getting enough protein in through the methods that we've talked about, I think it's completely fine. A lot of people want to freak out about how late you eat at night. I'm not one of those people. I think some people do need to eat later at night. It helps them go to sleep. That's another thing too. It's like, all right, so don't eat late at night, and eating it later at night can help you sleep. So now you're messing with your recovery and your cortisol from that. I mean, eating at night isn't a bad thing to do. Eating right before bed is not ideal. But if you're going to eat at night, you shouldn't have carbohydrates at night. Like, the last thing you need at night is carbohydrates, because your body is not going to process it. So what I would recommend is something light like fruit, but ideally, especially if you're deficient, is something of protein sort. And that's going to be something your body can use to repair during the night.
Peanut butter's okay?
I wouldn't recommend peanut butter unless you're trying to gain weight. Which I'm not saying that to be like tongue in cheek. That is something that is a strategy. If some people who want to, like, a kid who's in high school wants to build muscle, or anybody else who wants to gain size, having a peanut butter sandwich at night is a good thing to do. But for someone trying to lose, I would not. We have to make sure that we understand that if you're someone who is not a vegan, I would classify peanut butter as a fat, not a protein. Now, while I realize that peanut butter has protein in it, is more a fat at that point than it is a protein. So,
and not a good fat.
Well, no, it's a good fat. You can argue about peanut butter, but I would say if it's a natural peanut butter, something like Teddy's peanut butter is really good, and there's nothing else in it, it's just peanuts, then you're fine. However, I think almond butter or cashew butter would be better options, but I also don't think peanut butter is the worst either, again, if it's the right kind. I just wouldn't classify it as a protein. I would think of it more as a fat, which is something you need to think about, especially when you're looking to, like, yes, you need good fat to burn bad fat, but when you have a lot of excess fat you're trying to lose, you do want to cut down on your fat intake, regardless of good fat or not, because fat is 9 calories a gram, protein is 4 calories a gram, carbohydrates are 4 calories a gram, alcohol is 7 calories a gram. So if you're having fat, that's almost double the amount of density of calories than a protein would be. So that's just something to consider too.
Wow, didn't know that.
Yeah.
One question as far as the intermittent fasting goes, having the protein shake is still recommended?
Yes, absolutely.
As part of the fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely protein and collagen.
And collagen, okay. Yep, that seems to work out really well. It helps if I'm like a little hungry in the morning, having that protein shake helps a lot.
Well, I'm glad that you came on, because that basically reinforces what we were talking about earlier. That's what I was telling people.
Oh, okay.
So that's good.
It makes a big difference.
Thanks for tuning in to That Was Yesterday with me, Joe Carabase. And remember, every step forward is progress. We'll catch you next time. And in the meantime, if you found any value from this episode, please share with friends and go ahead and give us a 5-star review. I appreciate you. Talk to you soon.